Good morning. Good morning and welcome. All right, we're going to settle down and get started. Thank you very much. So good morning and welcome. My name is Mrs. Connery. I'm Director of Guidance here at Algonquin. Before we get started, just a couple of quick reminders, okay? We are so fortunate to have 3 admissions counselors joining us today to share some advice about the college admissions process. So I'm going to ask all of our students to be very respectful of their time as well as when they are speaking. So please, let's keep it quiet. Let's turn our phones off and put our phones away. And if you could please take your feet off the back of the seat and sit up, that would be great, okay? So let's be very respectful of our presenters and their time. So I'd like to take a minute just to welcome our presenters. We have been very fortunate to have them work with us for several years now. So thank you all for coming and joining us again today. We really appreciate it. First and foremost, we have Mr. Ken Sawada from Syracuse University. We have Katie, next to him we have Mrs. Katie Hager from Boston College. Ms. Hager is also a former Algonquin alum, right? She graduated from Algonquin. All right, and next to her is Shayna Eddy from Framingham State College. Ms. Hodgkin and Ms. Mackey are going to moderate the event for us today. All right, so they'll be posing a series of questions to our admissions counselors, and then they will be giving some feedback to all of you regarding various topics in the admissions process. And then at the end, we will provide an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mackey and Ms. Hodgkin, and I'm going to thank you all for being polite and respectful.
All right, I just want to say thank you and welcome again. It's great to see you in person this time. I'm going to jump right in and chat a little bit about school visits. Last month, we held workshops with our juniors where we discussed the process of searching for colleges that might be a good fit for them and encouraging them to do some information sessions and tours. Shayna, how important is it to visit the campus, and does this impact the admissions decision?
Great question. So I personally think a campus visit is probably one of the most important things that students can do as they're looking for colleges and universities. So I know the internet is a great spot, websites are wonderful, but we're putting our best pictures on there, and you're really not getting a good feel for the campus. So I really think if you have the opportunity to go and visit schools, and as you're still looking, you are so fortunate that you have so many schools in your backyard that you can go visit a very large school like Boston University, or you could visit a smaller school like Framingham State. You could go visit a local community college, but really get a good flavor for the different campuses. But when you really start narrowing down your schools, I think, taking a look and picturing yourself in that lecture hall or sitting out on the lawn, seeing yourself in the dining hall, this is really going to impact, your decision as to whether or not this school is a good fit for you. And I'm sure your counselors have talked a lot about fit. It's not necessarily schools, colleges and universities choosing you, but it's you choosing us, right? We want to make sure that you're going to be a good fit and that you're going to enjoy and thrive at your experience. So the campus visit, honestly, I think is probably one of the most important pieces. In terms of the admission process, and I know we'll be talking a little bit more about demonstrated interest, there are some schools out there that really do take into consideration how much interest you're, giving that school. So, have you visited them? Have you, talked to an admissions counselor? So if you're applying to a school that does consider demonstrated interest, then absolutely that's going to take, a big part of, maybe that admissions decision. But I also, too, when you go visit the schools and and you sit in on an information session and you have an opportunity to talk with a counselor, that counselor might be looking at your application. So if they know, oh, I met that student on Tuesday afternoon, that's going to stand out to them when they're reading. So I wouldn't say the campus visit is first and foremost in terms of being accepted into a school, but it definitely could play a role in some universities.
What type of opportunities do you offer prospective students who visit your campus in order to help them learn more about your school? And are you still doing virtual visits?
Sure. So visit opportunities certainly differ greatly from one campus to the next, but I think the most common type of visit you'll find at most universities would be an information session and tour, some combination of the two. And we certainly offer those in person. It's a 2-hour experience. You come to campus, you hear from an admission counselor as well as a panel of students, and then you get out on campus and see the community live in action. I think this is the most appropriate type of visit for all of you as juniors just beginning the college search process. It's a really great opportunity to take advantage of often during April vacation and in the summer months to start to get a feel for what these campus communities might look like. We do offer a version of this virtually still as well, so we'll offer the information session component online at different times throughout the year for students and their families, just to get a feel for what types of academic programs are offered and what the admissions process might look like as well. The other campus opportunity that you might find at many of the places you're looking at is more of a day visit program or a shadow program. So we call this the Eagle for a Day program at Boston College. You register online, you come to campus, you're paired with one student for either the morning or the afternoon, and you really get to live a day in the life of that student for the day. So you get to go to class with them, you see their residence hall, experience the dining halls, maybe sit with some of their friends at lunch. So I think that's kind of a second step visit, right? Once you narrow down your college list and you have maybe 5 or 6 places you're really excited about, you might want to pursue some of those shadow programs, perhaps in the fall of your senior year.
Great, thank you very much. And Ken, other than information sessions and tours, what other opportunities are available for students to learn more about your school?
Well, certainly college websites. There are so many resources online that students can do. My son, who is a high school junior, likes to use niche.com. There's a bunch of other ways like TikTok and Snapchat and Be Real, whatever all those things are. So that's available to you where you can research and see how students are doing. Alumni, people who have graduated from here and have gone to our various colleges, you can get a sense of what's going on of that college through people you may know. Maybe your parents have connections with alumni of schools also. Virtual mock classes, those are things that we host where you can take in a session with a current faculty member just to get a sense of how classes run. But the bottom line is just to use as many of the resources as possible from the campus visit to everything that I just mentioned, because just using one method is bad. So having as many hearing from different sources is going to be the best way.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we, in February, met with our juniors, and one of the things they got was a copy of their transcript. They looked it over to see, okay, what's on my transcript? This is what is sent to colleges. We did tell students the most important aspect of their application is the high school transcript. Katie, why do colleges consider the student's transcript to be most important?
Sure, so this is absolutely true. Hands down, every college and university will tell you that the high school transcript is the most important factor in making your admissions decision. And really the reason for that is the high school work that you do is the most predictive of how successful you'll be in the college environment as well, right? So the classes you choose to take, how you perform in those classes, that prepares you for life in college. So for us, that's the most important factor. All of the other things, which we'll certainly talk about throughout this panel, support the work you do at the high school level, and we want to see growth at the high school level. We know you have choice in terms of curriculum, so it really allows us to understand who you are as a student and what your potential may be in the campus environment as well.
All right, thank you. All right, Ken, this one is for you. What do you consider when you look at the high school transcript?
We're looking at the types of courses that you're taking, so rigor is important to us. On our website, we kind of list the things that we look for, and one of those things is ideally 4 years of English, history, math, and science, along with 3 years of foreign language. We are flexible with it, but that is our preference. So those are some of the things that we're looking for, as well as trends. So if you're on an upswing, let's say freshman year, especially for you during the pandemic, freshman and sophomore years were incredibly impacted. So have you since then perhaps had this rise on your transcript? So that's something that we would note and would love to see that upward trend, or maybe you've just been consistent all the way through, which is great as well. Some of our programs we review at Syracuse by department. So like, for example, our engineering reviewers will look to see strength in science. Hopefully you've taken physics if you're looking at engineering, and same with architecture. We're specific to that too. So there are some nuances here and there within our different programs that we have.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually glad you brought up the pandemic, because this junior class during their freshman year, they were in a hybrid remote model for the majority of the school year. Shayna, I'm going to ask you this. When looking at the students' grades from freshman year, is that something that you would take into account? Because we know that some students really had difficulty with that model.
Yes, so I think all admissions counselors right now are very much looking forward to reviewing next year's class and the year after, getting back to sort of this normalcy of in-person. But we're certainly, we are very much well aware of the challenges that students face with remote learning, hybrid learning. So that is definitely something that we will take a look at. As Ken mentioned, just about the trajectory, we really would want to see sort of that upward trend. So, your transcript does tell us a lot about you. If we know that you were in a hybrid model your first year and you didn't do so well, but you really turned it around your sophomore year, your junior year, you're doing well your first, second quarter, senior year, we can sort of make some assumptions that maybe that hybrid and that remote learning was a little more challenging for you. But we will definitely take that all into consideration. Like I said, I do think counselors are really looking forward to sort of the following years having everyone back to just sort of in person. But know that if you had a challenging freshman year and you're doing well sophomore and junior year, we're certainly going to take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Katie, you probably remember from when you attended Algonquin, we have a weighted GPA system. Okay, so we actually have a weighted GPA on a 5-point system. At BC, do you recalculate students' GPA? And if so, what courses do you consider when you recalculate?
Sure. So this question is going to vary so greatly depending on the university, and we do not recalculate GPAs at BC. So we look at your weighted GPA, but we also, more importantly, look at the academic story, right? So when I review an application, I really break down what that 4.1 or 3.6 might mean, right? In your freshman year, how many core academic subject classes did you take? And those classes would be English, math, science, history or social science, and foreign language. So how many of those did you take? At what level did you take them? And what was the average grade that you received in those courses for the year? And I do that for each academic year throughout high school. So while we don't recalculate GPAs, we do break them down significantly to make sure we understand what that GPA is made up of. I know Shayna's answer to this question will be very different. Shayna, is it okay if I throw it to her really quick? So at Framingham State, I think they take a different approach.
Absolutely. So representing just sort of the state university system here in Massachusetts. So whether you decide to look at Framingham State or Westfield State or UMass, UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, we are going to recalculate your grade point average. We are required by the state of Massachusetts to recalculate every student's grade point average. We do give extra weight to honors and AP courses. And then we come up with a weighted GPA. There is what's called a sliding scale for students who are taking SATs, choose to submit SATs, which, by the way, we are all test optional at this point. But if you do submit your SATs, there is a sliding scale depending on what your recalculated GPA and your SATs are. If not, we are looking at that grade point average, and again, just sort of the leveling of your courses. So I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with the state university and the UMass's requirements. They are online. If you just type in admissions standards for Massachusetts, it's a nice little pamphlet there. And it also breaks down what courses we're looking for. So there are 17 academic units that we are looking for from freshman year all the way through senior year. Just a piece to that, standards did change a couple of years ago where we do require students to take a math their senior year. So just please make note of that. But if you are looking to apply to one of the state universities or the UMasses, you definitely want to make sure that you're familiar with the state standards.
Thank you.
All right, so keeping with the idea of student transcripts, our students are going to begin course selection next week. Ken, how important is it to maintain a rigorous schedule in senior year and continue to enroll in core academic courses?
Yeah, I mean, it is important, just based on what I said a bit ago, is that we're looking for those specific number of years in each of the different subjects. Rigor is important too, so for example, if you've had college prep courses through your first 3 years, let's say you've gotten A's and B's this year, I would encourage you to work with your guidance counselor to take that next step for senior year and throw in an honors class or an AP level class if you're up for it. So it just helps us, because I will make a note on a student's file if I see either the rigor has dropped or they haven't challenged themselves their senior year. For example, if you are currently taking honors or AP level courses, I hope is that you continue to do that for senior year. The biggest thing is that senior year is it's a momentum boost towards college. It's, heard the term senioritis, but ultimately you want to overcome that because you're going to have to start up again rigorously for your freshman year of college.
Awesome, thank you. Shayna, students often ask the question, is it better for me to take a course where I can get an A, or should I take a harder course and risk getting a lower grade?
Yeah, so I think we've all sort of alluded to this with various questions. If you are doing well, we would really like to see you challenge yourself. So if you're taking that Algebra 1 course and a straight A, we would encourage you to possibly take an honors course, honors Algebra 2, to see how you do and challenge yourself. As Ken just said, you are preparing yourself for the rigor of the academics at the college level. So the more that you can challenge yourself and push yourself and do well, that's going to look impressive to the admissions committee. So you want to challenge yourself appropriately, though. I have seen transcripts where students will take all those honors courses and they're receiving D's or D minuses, for a couple years in a row. And sometimes I'll pause and say maybe they should have dropped back down to a college prep. So you want to challenge yourself appropriately, and you want to make sure that you're meeting with your guidance counselors. Having those conversations are very, very important. So again, just make sure you're having those conversations and challenge yourself appropriately.
All right, and I do have one more question that I want to add on. We do send Term 1 and Term 2 grades. How important is that when the colleges are making their decisions?
Absolutely. So Term 1 and Term 2 grades are very important. So as Ken said, your senior year is the closest you'll ever be to college, right? So as I said, your high school transcript predicts how successful you may be in a college environment as well, and senior year is most predictive of how you might perform in the college environment. So senior year grades are really important. It's also the time when you have the most choice in terms of curriculum. And we, as a highly selective place, are looking for students who have taken one of the most demanding programs at their high school, right? And I imagine for those of you who are excited about some of those upper level courses, that will be during your senior year. So we want to see success in those classes. We want to see strong grades. We want to see that you are capable of doing the work that we will present to you when you arrive on campus as well. So certainly important to maintain those trends and to continue to work hard. I also think it's an opportunity for those of you who are on an upward trend to showcase what you are capable of in the senior year. So certainly important to stay focused.
Thank you.
All right, so Shayna, once a student has applied to a school and indicated that their senior year courses are. So that's something, juniors, next year when you do apply to colleges, you do list every course that you're taking your senior year, okay? So part of it is what you're gonna be taking first semester and second semester. So they've reported that now in their application. What happens if they choose not to complete those courses?
So with every admissions decision, so, admissions decisions are being rendered usually around, we start, they could be going out in October all the way through. all of our acceptance letters do state on them that the acceptance is contingent upon successful completion of these courses. So as we've all set up here, continuing to strive and continuing to do well is going to make an impression. We do review every file after the decision has been made. So once those final transcripts come through, we do review them. I have pulled 1 or 2 acceptances, and that's something that you don't want to happen. So you want to make sure that if you are accepted to a university, you know that that's where you're going to be attending. If you do have to drop a course for a variety of reasons, you want to make sure that you let the college or university know at that point. I actually just reviewed a file this morning, and there was a note in there that the student did drop statistics their senior year, and there was a good reason for that. So if you decide that you're going to drop a course, or if you know that you're not going to complete it successfully, you want to make sure that you have those conversations with the admissions counselor at that college or university, so they are fully aware, and they can sort of, come up with the plan earlier as opposed to in June.
Okay, thanks. Ken, what can happen if a student is admitted but they don't maintain their senior grades? So that final transcript that we send, if those grades significantly dropped, what might happen?
I think it could lead to concern. Schools could potentially revoke an admission. It's until you step foot on campus in the fall, the admissions office could do that. I haven't seen it happen too often, but I definitely certainly have seen it happen through other reasons that may be non-academic, but it is important to go all the way through senior year, as we've said.
That's a good point. Can you explain some other reasons why an acceptance would be rescinded?
Sure. There are maybe inappropriate behavior, or for example, an admitted student Facebook page. Perhaps students are sending messages to other students that are not in line with the values of the institution that they're going to. So things like that, you always have to remember that once you're admitted to a school, you're a representative of that institution, starting before you even graduate from high school. So making sure that you're on point all the way through is crucial.
Okay, thanks.
All right, on to everybody's favorite, standardized testing. So we've been meeting individually with our students, discussing scheduling for SATs and ACTs, and we've also covered them in workshops. Following the pandemic, the majority of colleges went test optional, and we know many of those schools are extending that practice. Ken, for test optional schools, students are often confused as to whether or not they should send their scores. Can you speak to when it makes sense for a student to send their score? And would sending or not sending test scores impact their acceptance?
So for us, we are test optional with our admissions process. It can differ from school to school. So for example, Syracuse test optional. I have a friend who works at TCU, also test optional, but they have a do no harm policy. So if you do submit test scores that are not within their admission range, then they will just put those to the side and it won't negatively impact you. At Syracuse, we don't have that. So if you do submit a test score that's below our admission range, it could impact you negatively. So it is important for you to do, and we'll try to communicate that to you and your guidance staff as well, to which schools do what. But it's crucial, I think, to determine that. If you don't submit test scores to us, we're not going to look at that negatively. I'm just going to look at the rest of your application. I think some people think that we see a file and see no test score and think, oh, they must have done poorly. But that's not, we just move on with the application. We just look at everything else. And I'll give you a personal example. My son, took the PSATs, and his PSAT score was just a bit lower than our median admission range. So for him, I'm going to encourage him not to submit. So if he gets that same score when he takes the SAT for the first time, that's the advice that I'm going to give him. So I just hope you know that this is coming out of, what I'm saying is true. And I'm using that in real life as well. So the bottom line is I would advise you to look at the mid-50 percentile of the admission for different schools. Like we provide that and can do that with students, and it's within this range. So if you fall within the range, I personally would encourage students to submit their test scores in that case.
All right, I just want to ask a follow-up question. So oftentimes we have students come down and they ask us, okay, this is what I've got. What schools should I send my test scores to? And we'll make that recommendation for students based on that percentile that we have in Naviance. How do schools feel about students calling and asking about the do no harm policy? Is that safe?
I think you're entitled to ask whatever you'd like of institutions. I think you should ask because you're the one that, you need to know. So I think and whatever answer you get, I mean, that's the answer that you get, but you do need to ask.
And you'd rather hear from the students, right, not us?
Yes.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yes, students versus parents. Yeah.
What about the parents?
Parents are welcome. Are there parents in the room? Yeah. The parents are welcome to reach out to us. We would love to have your student drive the process as much as you can.
Absolutely, thank you. Shayna, if a student chooses not to submit test scores, what other factors are taken into consideration for the applicants?
Yes, again, that high school transcript, right? The transcript, the curriculum that you're taking, did you challenge yourself and, take that honors course or possibly that AP course if that was appropriate for you? What courses did you take your senior year? Are you taking just the bare minimum for graduation, or are you taking maybe an extra science course or, an extra history course? So all of these things are going to play a role. We'll also take a look at, for schools that require letters of recommendation or an essay. Those are all things that, that schools will take into consideration. Again, that demonstrated interest. So whether you toured the campus, this is not something that we consider at Framingham, but there are schools, like I said, that do consider demonstrated interest. So, did you take the opportunity to meet with your admissions counselor? Did you take the opportunity to take that campus tour or go on that shadow day? These are some of the other things that we're going to take into consideration.
Great, thank you. Katie, we've been getting this question a lot lately. So I'm going to give you a tough one. But with the number of schools changing to a test optional policy, has this impacted the competitiveness of the applicant pool? I've been asked that a lot by parents and students.
Sure, and it's a great question. It's a really complicated answer as well. So it hasn't necessarily changed our selectivity or competitiveness. However, it certainly has inflated average SAT and ACT scores that have been submitted. So because we were test optional for the last 2 years, for the first time in our history, students self-selected whether or not they should send their scores. And naturally, the students with the best scores sent their scores, and the students without scores didn't send them at all. So our averages went up significantly, right? So we're running into a bit of an issue now where, for example, I had a student this year tell me, well, I chose not to submit my 1470 because I didn't think that was strong enough. And I thought to myself, a 1470, that is, that's the top 2% of test takers in the world. That's crazy. But I think because all of our averages on the websites have been inflated over the last 2 years, it's really causing a lot of confusion among students and parents, rightfully so. So to your earlier question, I think picking up the phone, calling us, we're always happy to have a transparent conversation. I think in general, we like to tell students, typically students who are competitive for admission to Boston College are in the top 10% or so of their high school class, right? So if you've tested and are in the top 10% or so of testing candidates worldwide, it's probably a fairly good idea to send your tests, right? That is reflective of the work you do in the classroom. It is consistent with the work you do in the classroom. It's an additional data point that we can consider in the process. So selectivity hasn't changed, but those averages have gone up, and I think if anything, it's just caused some undue stress and confusion.
But just to reiterate, making a phone call
of course
to the admissions counselor
yes.
is always okay.
Absolutely.
All
and,
right.
Many of us have worked with our respective high schools for years and years. So I think we're familiar with the Algonquin community. We're familiar with the types of test scores that may be competitive and are on our campus environment. So always happy to have those conversations.
Great. Thank you so much.
Can I just add to that?
Absolutely.
If you're not picking up just sort of we want to get to know you, we want to hear from you. We do this type of work for a reason. And as Ken just said, he's given you advice not only as a representative from Syracuse, but he's also given the same advice to his own child. So, again, get to know your admissions counselor and ask those questions and reach out to us because we do want to hear from you and talk with you.
That's really helpful, Shayna. Thank you.
So we've been talking about different pieces that go with the application, like the transcript, possibly test scores. We also know that part of the application looking at activities that students have been involved in. And that's something that the students use everyone. It's going to be filling out their applications and listing activities that you've been involved in through high school. So what we often hear from students and parents is they're asking whether it's good to be involved in a few activities that they're passionate about or a lot of different activities to show that they're around. So that's kind of the question that we often get. Shayna, I'm going to ask you this. How important are extracurricular activities in the admissions decision?
So again, just, taking a look at the application as a whole, and that is definitely something that admissions counselors take a look at. What activities, what jobs, it might not necessarily just be an activity at the school, but it might be that you need to hold a part-time job, and how many hours a week are you putting in for that part-time job? I would say, I think sometimes, I've been in this business for a very long time now, and I've seen a lot of transcripts and a lot of applications, and sometimes I think students feel like, well, if I have, a whole bunch of activities, that's going to outshine my transcript. Maybe if my transcript is not as impressive as I would like it to be. That's really not the case, right? You've heard it numerous times here this morning, that transcript is number one. So in terms of the activities, I would say they're certainly important, but you also want to have a very good balance. You want to have a good balance in terms of the number of activities that you're doing, that you're still able to get the work that you need to get done.
All right, thanks. Ken, Shayna touched upon that with work. Some students do choose or they need to work and have a part-time job. How do you view that?
I mean, for us, we would view it similarly to extracurricular activities. For a lot of students, it's something that, like you said, you need to do. You may need to do for your family, for whatever reason, single-parent household, just to help out with family contributions. So we understand it if that's the case. So, for example, and I think about leadership too, because when we're looking at extracurriculars, we're looking for that. And you can do that within your potential jobs that you have. Like if you're a lifeguard and you train other lifeguards, that's something that, that's a leadership role that, that would count towards your application. So there's ways that you can still demonstrate involvement and leadership through part-time jobs.
Great, thank you.
In May, we'll be discussing letters of recommendations with students. We've actually already asked some of our students to start thinking about who they may want to ask for letters. Katie, could you share your thoughts on how many letters a student should have and who they should be asking to write them?
Sure, absolutely. So I think most colleges and universities give you a number of recommendations that they expect, and they expect to receive that number of recommendations, and that is totally enough. So for us, we expect 2 letters of recommendation from teachers, 1 letter of recommendation from your school counselor, and I would say probably 50 to 60, maybe even 70% of our applicant pool does just that, and that's great. That qualifies for them for admission. Some students who do feel there's someone in their community or someone that may know them well that can add value in a different way than the teachers have may ask for an additional letter of recommendation and include that in their application file, and we will certainly review those as well. In terms of who you should ask, I think asking a junior year teacher is a great idea, someone who knows you well. Most importantly, someone who can really speak to your character and your commitment in the classroom. We already know how well you performed in the classroom, right? The transcript tells us that. So information more about your resilience, your character, that's what's going to be helpful in adding another layer, another element to get to know you in your application.
So just to follow up, because I've been getting this question already this year, a lot of students are asking about having a sophomore year teacher.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on that versus a junior year teacher? Because we usually recommend students get a junior year teacher because they've seen them most recently.
Yeah, I think at least 1 junior or senior teacher would be helpful for us personally. I think if there's a sophomore teacher that you built a really wonderful relationship with, perhaps they inspired your interest in math, right? And that's now why you're pursuing this rigorous math trajectory. that's someone who can really speak to who you are in the class and who you're becoming. So I think depending on the case, it may be appropriate, but in general, I think junior year, when you're taking those more demanding courses, more geared towards college preparation, is probably the best fit.
Great, thank you. Shayna, how are recommendations used during the admissions process?
Yeah, so as Katie alluded to, some colleges and universities require a certain number of recommendations, and they require recommendations from a specific person. So they're going to, that is part of their admissions process and how they weigh those in, with making a final decision. That's something that they're going to calculate out. So at Framingham, we actually do not require letters of recommendation, but I would say probably about 80% of our applicants actually submit letters of recommendation, and we welcome those and we read those. The application, the letter of recommendation just adds a little more flavor, I call it, to your application. It provides the admissions counselor a little more insight as to who you are as a person, how you are in the classroom. Katie talked a little bit about just, asking someone who knows you a little bit more, right? Because they're going to be able to reflect that in their letter, and that way we can take that into consideration. It also may open up some doors of, something personal that's going on in your life. Maybe your sophomore year, you really struggled, but maybe there was something going on there. That's something that, someone might put into a letter of recommendation if you allow them to do so. So again, it just gives us a little more information about you as a person.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to talk about recommendations more with our students in May. Another topic we actually go over a lot is the college essay. In the past, we found that students are often concerned about finding that perfect topic. As admissions counselors, I know you read a lot of essays, like a lot. So Ken, I'm going to start with you. What makes a good college essay?
The obvious would be strong grammar and punctuation, so make sure that that's all set. I love seeing essays that I can visualize and be able to empathize with what the student's going through. One thing that the topic doesn't need to be some incredible life thing that has altered your entire pathway through this universe. Like it can be a basic thing. Some of the best essays I've read have included, like ice cream was the main topic on one of them. Another was a decision a student had to make between getting an iPhone or a pet gecko. And the mom was like, you can only pick one of the two, and the kid picked the gecko, which was I was quite surprised that he went that direction. But just interesting to hear like what he had to do to take care of this pet. So those are the things that kind of stand out more so than like the life-altering things. One thing to avoid doing is being repetitive throughout your application. Like for example, we do interviews at Syracuse, so I interviewed a student and like all of his answers were about soccer. I like soccer, it's fine, but all of them were about soccer, which is great. And then I got to his application, and then his activities were all soccer related. Again, that's fine, but then the essay, he also wrote about soccer, and I'm like, that's a wasted opportunity. You could have talked about something, like I know where you're at with soccer, I know you love it. But that's an opportunity where you could write about something totally different. I want to learn about you, and so you can utilize the application to share as much of yourself as possible. So just don't be too repetitive.
I think that's a really good point. Katie, do you have any advice for students? Because I know they feel a lot of pressure when they write that college essay.
They do, yeah. I feel like this is probably the thing that students stress most about in the college admissions process, and as a result, they spend a lot of time working on these essays. They spend a lot of time with teachers and college counselors, and as a result, most of them are pretty good, right? Very rarely do we review an essay that just completely misses the mark. So I think you should have confidence that if you are writing an essay that is true to you, that is about something you care about, that is written in your own voice, that it will probably be fairly well received by an admission counselor. My advice is not to stress too much about the common application essay, but for those colleges that do require an additional writing sample, so for us we have a Boston College writing supplement, I would encourage you to spend the same amount, if not more time, focusing on those writing supplements. And the reason for that is this is our opportunity, for example, at BC, to understand the fit, the relationship that you've built with Boston College, right? And that's so much of what highly selective admissions is. There are a lot of qualified students out there, but it's about understanding what students are going to be the best fit students for our campus. And these writing samples often bring that to light. I really like reading them. I often find they're a better representation of a student's voice. They haven't necessarily been edited by all of your English teachers, and I think that's a really good thing. I think they really allow us to understand who you are as a writer and who you are as a person. So my advice is, yes, I know it's overwhelming, but try to just stay true to who you are. Maybe if you were sitting down in an interview with us, what is something you'd want us to know, right? Like Ken said, it doesn't have to be traumatic or life-changing or sad. It's just something that you'd like us to know about you. And that can be as simple as a relationship you share with someone or a pet you've owned or so on and so forth. So I would focus on maybe the smaller things rather than the topic at hand.
All right, thank you. Shayna, we understand that Framingham does not require students to write an essay.
Mm-hmm.
If students choose to submit an essay, would that be taken into account?
Absolutely. So we actually, many moons ago, we actually required students to submit an essay, and we did do away with that a number of years ago. And but just like the letter of recommendations, even though they're not required at Framingham, a lot of students will submit those, and the same thing goes for the essay. So we do have a lot of students who have written an essay for another college or university and choose to submit that to Framingham State. We will read them. I usually have the final round for making admissions decisions, and I still go back to the essay and read a little bit about the applicants coming in when they submit it. So if you choose to submit that essay, we're certainly going to read that and take all of that into consideration.
All right, thanks.
As juniors, our students are just beginning the college search process, and they're just getting used to the college admissions lingo. Ken, can you explain the difference between early action, early decision, 1, and 2, regular decision, and rolling admissions?
I used to work for a rolling admission school, and basically if you applied anywhere during the timeline of the college application process, like in November, you could apply and we'd get back to you within 2 weeks. And you could do that all the way through the course of the year. The early process for early decision, early action, those deadlines tend to be earlier, hence the name. So for us, the early decision deadline is November 15th, whereas regular decision, the deadline for that is January 5th. Okay. So early action and early decision enable you to apply sooner to a school and also receive your decision sooner. Okay. The difference between early action and early decision is that early decision is binding, meaning that you have to attend that school if admitted and must withdraw your applications from other schools. So for students looking at early decision and you're looking to apply to those schools, ED, ideally that school should be your number one choice financially, academically, socially. It's kind of what we like to advise. And then, the thing I wanted to stress was that it does feel like more people are applying ED over the last several years, and I feel like there is this pressure to do so. I just want you to not give in to that peer pressure just because someone else is applying ED that you're going to do the same thing. You have to make sure with your family, with your guidance staff, that that's the right fit for you.
Great, thank you. Shayna, what type of applicant would you consider to be a candidate for early action admissions, and what's the advantage of applying early action?
Yeah, so for early action, I think, for schools that do offer early action, you want to see, again, sort of what that average, grade point average that they're looking for. Do you at least meet the average, or are you above that? Same thing with those SATs. Are you in the median score that they're promoting? At Framingham, we are enrolling admissions. However, we do offer an early action deadline of November 15th, and we guarantee a decision to our students by December 15th. But we will start rolling out decisions as soon as they become available. The advantage to early action is, first of all, you tend to hear back from the schools earlier, which we know that the anxiety level, with this college process really starts to rise, usually around now, and just continues until you actually receive those acceptance letters. I see some parents smiling. And so that way you get to hear a little bit earlier than the regular applicant pool. Sometimes merit scholarships are a little more readily available during early action. So again, I would encourage you to reach out to the school and ask what are the advantages for that school. But I know at Framingham, merit scholarships, there are definitely more merit money earlier on in the season. And again, we just want to make sure that we're getting those decisions out sooner to you, your financial aid packages sooner, getting you to campus for some admitted student receptions. So those are some of the advantages for early action.
Thank you. Katie, I know that BC offers early decision, and I have kind of a longer question for you because we do get this one a lot also. And as Ken was saying, there are more students that are applying early decision. What type of applicant would you consider to be a strong candidate for early decision? And what are the advantages of applying early decision?
Sure. So first and foremost, a student who is considering early decision should, with no question, feel that Boston College is their best fit university, right? That, like Ken said, academically, socially, and financially, BC is where they want to be next year. It's also for students who feel as though that likely their coursework through the end of their junior year and showing us what courses they're taking in their senior year is representative of who they are as a student, right? We might see term 1 grades before we review our early decision candidates. For early decision 2, we will see the first semester grades. But again, you want to make sure that you're really showcasing the best of who you are as a student when you apply to Boston College. So if you choose to apply early, you should feel pretty confident in what you're doing so far. In terms of the advantage of applying early decision, this is pretty consistent for every college across the country who offers early decision. There certainly are benefits in the admissions process. So I'll give you some numbers to kind of explain those benefits. For us this year in total, we will have received about 35,000 applications for admission. About 5,000 of those came through early decision 1 and 2. So 5,000 of the 35,000. Of those 5,000 students, we will enroll about 1,200 students from those 2 decision plans. So just over 50% of our incoming class will come from early decision 1 and early decision 2. Admit rate, 30% or so. Regular decision, about 30,000 applications to enroll the other 1,100 students or so. So we will probably admit about 4,000 or 5,000. Admit rate probably closer to 15%, right? So you can understand the math. There certainly are some advantages, but as Ken said, again, it is not the only way to be admitted to a college or university. It really is a family decision and something you really need to think through. And again, something we're willing to have that conversation with you individually if you do think it might be a good fit for you.
Awesome, thank you. Can you speak to what happens if a student applies as an early decision candidate but doesn't get the financial aid package they need in order to attend to the school?
Sure, so this is a really important question, and all of us as colleges and universities at this point offer a lot of resources on our websites for you to understand what the cost of our education might be for you and your family. So for us, for example, we have 2 calculators on our website, the net price calculator and the quick cost estimator. And these are really great resources for families. You can go in, you can plug in your financial information and get an estimate of what the cost of a BC education, for example, will likely be. It's really important that you enter accurate information to get an accurate estimate, right? We encourage early decision students to do this because we essentially say that if our financial aid award is not reflective of that calculator, we will of course release you from the ED agreement, right? We would never ask a family to go into debt over this. However, if it's what you expected to receive when you decided to apply early decision, it is a binding contractual agreement, and that will be a more challenging conversation. So certainly something you want to do the work on the front end rather than after you receive your admissions decision.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so when students apply to colleges, I know they are often asked to indicate a major or an area of interest that they want to study. Shayna, I'm going to ask you this. If a student declares a major and does not get into that particular major at Framingham, will you offer them admission to another major?
Yes, so we do ask for our first choice major on our application, and we do have a couple of competitive programs at Framingham where if we feel as though a student may not qualify for that program. We may offer them a seat in that program, but they may have to also participate in one of our support systems that coincide with that major. We also, too, will admit a student into the university, and I think this is a practice, with some colleges and universities, that they just admit you into the college, and then applying to the actual choice of major comes at a later date. But yes, if you're applying, I always tell students to put your first choice. If it's not going to be sort of in your cards coming in as a first-year student, there's usually a pathway to that major, but we can certainly start you on that road coming in maybe as an undeclared student.
Okay, thanks. Ken, does Syracuse have majors that are more competitive than others? And if so, what would be more competitive?
We attend to colleges at Syracuse, and the admission rates differ greatly from department to department. And we try to advertise it, so whenever we're presenting an information session, so if I'm here, for example, this fall presenting, really loud. So if I'm here presenting, then I'm going to tell you what the top programs are that are more competitive to gain admission to, because I want to make sure that I want to put you in the best position possible for admission. So for example, communications is quite competitive at our institution. Sport management, sport analytics as well are just some examples. So it's important for you to ask the different schools what, if we're not telling you or advertising that, I think it is important to ask.
And I think that's where that phone call really helps. All right, Katie, at BC, what's the process to change your major once it's enrolled?
Our philosophy is a bit different at BC. We admit you to one of 4 undergraduate schools or colleges: arts and sciences, management, education, or nursing. We don't admit you based on your major. So once you're at BC within a school or college, you can change your major very easily. The more challenging part comes if you'd like to switch your academic division. So the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, for example, is our largest division on campus. If you start in management and want to switch to arts and sciences, no problem. You go to the registrar, you make that switch. If you start in arts and sciences and want to go to business, that is far more difficult. So it really is important, as my colleagues have said, to apply to your first choice division. In our case, for us, if you are well qualified for admission to BC, in general, you are well qualified for whatever division you apply to.
All right, and our last topic to discuss is demonstrated interest. Over the past few years, we've heard that demonstrated interest can be a factor in the admissions process. Shayna, can you explain what demonstrated interest means and provide some examples, please?
Yes, so we've talked a little bit about that already here this morning. Demonstrated interest is really the interest that you're showing that college or university. And so again, some colleges and universities, as they're reviewing applications, they really do look at this demonstrated interest. We do track sort of every interaction that you have with the college or university. So if you call our office, I'm making notes on our phone call. If you come for a campus tour, we're tracking that all with your file. As Ken mentioned, an interview or that phone call. So whatever it is that you are, engaging with the college and university, that is all being tracked. So for colleges and universities that are really looking at that, that is going to be, really important for you to, again, just engage with that school. Again, I think that campus tour is first and foremost. And again, just those questions that you may have, and to pick up the phone or to send that email. But again, all of that is tracked on your files, so just know that as well.
Ken, does Syracuse track demonstrated interest, and if so, how?
We do track demonstrated interest. Kind of Shayna just mentioned a few of the ways. But if you were to visit campus, or even do things virtually, or attending a college fair where a school is represented, we would count all of that. Interviews as well. But just to stress that half of the colleges don't utilize demonstrated interest in the process. We have an example here. We do, but just know that not every school does. I think the biggest piece of advice is just demonstrated interest should happen naturally if you are seriously interested in a school or college. So it should automatically and naturally occur, but also it's good to keep in the back of your mind that it's something that colleges could take into account.
And Katie, after applying, are there follow-up steps that you expect from applicants?
Sure, and again, just to echo a varying perspective, we don't track demonstration of interest at all. So I think this leads to your question of what action steps do we expect, and I think it's whatever you need of us, right? If you need to ask, do you track demonstration of interest? If you have a clarifying question on your application, that's what we expect of you in terms of communication. There are no kind of hard and fast expectations, with the exception of certain populations like waitlisted students. We do want to see that you're still interested in the university. Often our students who are deferred from an early round to a regular decision round like to send us an update, perhaps with senior year grades and some of the things they've been up to. So those are certainly welcome, but otherwise I would say the action steps should be organic. They should feel like you feel comfortable reaching out to us, certainly students and parents, to get whatever you need to feel successful in this process.
All right. And I think Andrea is going to take some time to ask about financial aid.
Yeah, I think especially we have some parents here, and this is being recorded and posted. I know parents often have questions about financial aid and scholarships. Shayna, how can students and parents find what is required for financial aid?
Yeah, so again, I think the website is probably your best tool for this. As we mentioned, every college and university has a calculator on the website, so you can sort of do some calculations in terms of predicting how much each college and university is going to cost. But also just the requirements in terms of what we require at each of our universities. Some of us just require that FAFSA form, which is that free financial aid form. Some require additional documents. And so again, the websites are really going to lay all that out. And if you have any questions, I think financial aid really is probably one of the most anxiety-ridden processes with the college process. Definitely reach out. So, we're sitting up here talking about admissions folks. You can certainly reach out to your admissions counselor, but you could also reach out to the financial aid office too if you do have additional questions. But I think for the most part, the website really is the first place to start looking for that information.
Okay, thank you. Hey, when are students typically required to have the documents submitted? And are there different deadlines if someone's applying early to a college or the regular decision?
Sure. So often the deadlines do differ. For us, they mirror the decision plan deadlines as well. So November 1st is our early decision plan. Documents are due November 15th, just so we can present you with a financial aid award if you are admitted immediately following your offer of admission. One quick thing to note, though, for us, we are one of about 21 colleges or universities in the country at this point that are both need blind, meaning that your ability to pay will never impact your admissions decision, and we guarantee to meet 100% of students' demonstrated need, which means you fill out the paperwork, we calculate your family contribution, we'll meet 100% of the difference, regardless of when you apply for financial aid. So these deadlines are priority deadlines for us. But if your family's financial situation changes, your admitted early decision, it changes in March, and you decide to apply for financial aid, we will award you the same amount then that we would have in December. So another great question to ask based on the university you're interested in.
Great. Ken, how can students and parents find out about the scholarships available at the schools they're applying to?
The admissions officer will share with you what those methods are. For us, for example, we automatically consider every student for merit, so you'll be part of that process without even doing anything. The other thing I'll stress is that, like Shayna was saying, the webpage, our financial aid page lists all of the outside scholarships that are available that you could apply to. So that's available on most of our websites, and then also working with your guidance office, because they may have other resources there in terms of finances that they can help you with.
Thank you. So I think we want to leave some time for either parents or students to ask some questions. I have a microphone I can take around if people have questions for our panelists.
Hi, so I'm applying for a music performance major, and I was wondering how important is GPA and the transcript compared to audition and portfolio elements for a talent-based scholarship, talent-based major.
Our school does have performance programs that require an audition or portfolio. So any of those programs that are within our School of Architecture or Visual and Performing Arts, we usually say it's about 50-50. So 50% of it will be based on talent. The other 50% typically are academics and everything else that makes up the application.
I have a question about like the work thing you were talking about. Would you prefer to see someone like stick with the job for a long amount of time and show loyalty, or would you prefer to see like a variety of different skills and like that kind of thing?
I think either is fine. I think some students have a variety of jobs for a variety of reasons, right? And some students find one job and stick with it for the entirety of high school, and that is perfectly acceptable as well. I think the real essence of what we're looking for in the extracurricular section of the application is for you to tell us who you are outside of the classroom. So that might be work, that might be student government, that might be athletics. We just want to understand another dimension of who you are. So being true to yourself there is the way to go.
Is this on? Oh, okay. This question is for Ken. Would you rather see, when it comes to electives and such, would you rather see someone have a very focused stuff like focusing on art or focusing on business, or would you rather see them take a variety of different electives?
I think it's important for us to provide you with flexibility to do what you're, and people's like paths can differ. Like you might have this, I'm gonna do science for the rest of my life, and then in the middle of senior year have this complete switch to do something else. So I have flexibility. It'd be nice, you know, if you're applying it to like our engineering school, that maybe if your school offers some separate classes in regards to that, to take some of those classes. I think that it can only prepare you. But I also think there's no cutthroat rule that you have to do that as well. So I think we want to provide some flexibility for you also.
What are the benefits of early action versus early decision? Like, is there one where you can like get in, or like, what are like the major differences?
So I can speak just to the early action piece, and I'll let my colleagues talk about the early decision. But for early action, it's a non-binding agreement, right? So you can apply early, receive your, hopefully your acceptance as well as your financial aid package early on in the read-in season. But it's non-binding, so you still have until May 1st to submit your enrollment deposit. So you have time to visit the campus, come to our accepted student events, maybe do a shadow day, so you have a lot of other opportunities before making that final decision.
I would just add, I think the other benefit of applying early action versus early decision somewhere is that you can apply to early action many places, right? So it allows you to possibly receive many acceptance letters, review many financial aid awards, so that you can make a really educated decision with your family. Unfortunately, we don't offer early action anymore, but certainly for schools who do, I think it's a good option.
So for people who do good on the SAT versus someone who doesn't submit their score, would you lean towards the person who submitted their SAT and got a good score over someone who didn't take it at all, or would that not have an effect?
That's the million-dollar question, absolutely. So, and I think it's totally depends on the case. Almost never does it come down to two students and we have to pick one, right? That very rarely happens in the admissions process where we're comparing two exact students. One has tests and one doesn't, right? That's just not realistic. I will say for us, testing is an additional data point that we can advocate on your behalf. So sometimes, yes, testing may help you in our process with full transparency.
I just want to add to that, at Framingham, I will say, even though we are test optional, students who do choose to submit their test scores may or may not have, especially if we're looking at students for our honors program, students who do submit those SAT scores and are doing well may be accepted into that program, where someone who may not. So just keep that in mind as well.
So after you've done like a campus tour or something, what's the best way to follow up, like with an admissions counselor or something? Like what
what's like the best course of action to like show more demonstrated interest in that school?
I've had students who've reached out to me after their campus tour to tell me like just how it went, and I'm always curious to know how students, is the student having the same experience that I like presented to them, or is it something completely different? So I enjoy hearing from students after their campus tour and their visit, and so I'll usually reply back to that student, but also we will track that response to us. So yeah, follow up with an email. For me, phone calls are fine, but emails for me would be preferred.
How important is taking AP courses to the admissions process, and also if I choose not to submit my AP score, does that hurt my transcript or my how the college looks at me?
Sure. So for us, taking advanced coursework is very important. So we are looking for students who are pursuing one of the most demanding programs available at their high school, obviously within a range that is comfortable and appropriate for them, right? I know Algonquin offers a lot of APs. We don't expect students to have taken all of them. That's not realistic. We don't expect students to take 5 or 6 APs in their senior year, right? Certainly some students choose to do that. But I think choosing to challenge yourself appropriately will set yourself up for success in our process. In terms of AP scores, my advice is always, if you're going to send them, only self-report them until you're admitted to a place. There's a cost associated with that, and it's just not necessary until you're enrolled somewhere. But certainly if you'd like to self-report your scores, again, that's another data point we can use to advocate for you. But we don't look negatively at all on students who choose not to self-report a score.
So if you're struggling in a certain topic, but you're doing well in others, how will that affect your admissions?
I mean, I think it's definitely something that we'll take into consideration, right, when reviewing the file, and also taking a look at what major you're looking to choose to study at the college or university. So if you are struggling in science, for example, and you decide to apply to our biology program or our chemistry program, that might not be the best fit for you. But at Framingham, we definitely do take that into consideration, and a lot of times I find when students choose to submit a letter recommendation, a lot of times that's usually indicated on the letter recommendation that maybe there's a weakness in this particular area. But we look at the overall, right? Students are better in one area and maybe not as well as another, so we're going to take all that into consideration.
I just want to add to that, if you have, kind of on a related note, if you've struggled in a class, let's say sophomore year, and you kind of want to explain that, maybe there's a reason behind it, you could, whether it's through an interview or through on the Common App, there's an additional information section where you can talk about that. Do feel free to explain yourself just to provide some context if there is something perhaps that you struggled with at some point.
I have a question. Is there a difference between the ACT and the SAT if you're applying?
No. So we accept the SAT or the ACT. We have absolutely no preference. We will super score both exams, meaning we will take individual best section scores from different test dates and combine them for an overall best composite score. I will just say students tend to perform better depending on who they are. The SAT is more of a marathon approach to a test. The ACT is more of a sprint, lots of questions, quick responses. Students do better based on who they are as a learner, so that's totally fine.
When taking the or AP classes, the College Board lets you send free score reports before you are able to see your scores. So, for example, if I take the SAT and I send my free score report in, and I thought I did well, but then I didn't do very well on that test, and then I sent that score report in, and then later on I take the SAT again because I want to get a good score. Can I send my new score in as well, or how would that work?
Definitely, you can do that. Also, sending a score report, and this might vary, but from an operational perspective, sending a score report doesn't tell us you want your scores considered. So there is a question on our application that says, will you be submitting test scores? If you answer yes to that, we will consider your tests. In your case, perhaps you answer no until you know what your scores are, right? And then you call us and you say, I'd like my test scores considered, and we can change your answer to yes. So that happens as well for students.
how important is it to have like major-related courses? Like, as of now, I'm kind of undecided about like what my major in college is going to be, but like if I'm deciding between taking biology or computer science senior year, like I'm considering them both as majors. Would you want to see one or the other, depending on what I eventually choose my major as being?
I think for us, there's no preference. Again, I think, as I was saying earlier to another response, like you may switch and decide to switch halfway through your senior year. So it's absolutely fine. I would go in the direction that you feel comfortable at the time, and then after that, you can always adjust. And we have students, who come in undecided. On average, I think the average college student changes their mind 2 times during their college career anyways. So again, I just want to preach that flexibility for your senior year classes.
I'll just add, so we do expect students to take 4 years of 5 core subject areas, which are English, math, science, history, and foreign language. Biology is considered a natural science. Computer science is considered a math course. So just something to consider as you're thinking about your senior year schedule. In general, for us, we like to see electives in addition to those core classes, right? Not in place of a core class.
I don't know if this mic is, now it's on, okay. So the bell is going to ring in just a minute, but I would like everyone to give a great round of applause to our presenters. All right.